The streets of New York were bustling with life, cars honking, people rushing, the rhythm of the city never stopping. But amidst all the movement, a man sat hunched in the corner of a sidewalk, as if he no longer belonged to this world. His worn-out military jacket, tattered boots, and dust-covered hands hinted at a past filled with discipline and honor. But now he was just a shadow of who he once was. His name was David Carter. He had served his country in Afghanistan for years, fighting with courage and dedication. But when he returned, nothing was the same. The ghosts of war haunted him, turning his nights sleepless and his days hopeless. He couldn't hold down a job. He had lost his family, and he had become more and more isolated. And now, he was just another forgotten soldier, sitting beside a rusty barrel fire, trying to make it through another cold night. That evening, as David wrapped himself in a ragged blanket, he noticed a group of young men approaching. They were laughing, carrying fast food bags, and shoving each other playfully. One of them nudged his friend and pointed in David's direction. "Hey, look at that guy. He used to be a soldier, right? Now he's nothing." The other one chuckled. "I bet he still thinks he's in the army. Let's see if he can still fight." David slowly lifted his head. His eyes were weary, but something inside him stirred. The young men kept getting closer. There was nowhere to run. And just as one of them took another step forward, a firm voice rang out through the cold night air. That same night, John McCain was walking through the city after attending a charity event. To him, veterans were not just former soldiers. They were the backbone of a nation. Yet he had seen firsthand how so many of them were abandoned, left to struggle alone. As he strolled down the sidewalk, he noticed a disturbance up ahead. A group of young men had surrounded a homeless man, taunting him. McCain felt a familiar sense of unease. Something wasn't right. He quickened his pace. David flinched as one of the young men grabbed his shoulder. "Hey, soldier boy, what's wrong? You scared?" Another one picked up an empty bottle from a trash can and smashed it onto the pavement. "Maybe we should give him a medal." Just then, one of the young men felt a strong hand grip his shoulder. He turned around and froze. Standing before him was John McCain. His stern face carried the weight of years of experience, authority, and an unwavering sense of justice. "I think it's time you boys moved along," McCain said, his voice calm but firm. The group hesitated. They recognized him. There was a brief moment of whispered exchanges before they let out a nervous laugh, shrugged, and walked away. McCain turned to David, crouching down to meet his gaze. His face was unshaven, his cheeks sunken, but his eyes still held a glimmer of something that had not yet been completely extinguished. "What's your name?" McCain asked, his tone warm yet commanding. David hesitated, his voice hoarse from disuse. David Carter." McCain narrowed his eyes slightly. That name sounded familiar. "David Carter, you served in Afghanistan, didn't you?" David slowly nodded. McCain exhaled deeply. This man had once been a warrior who protected his country, but now there was no one left to protect him. As McCain guided David into a small cafe, the man hesitated at the entrance. The sounds of laughter, the smell of fresh coffee, everything inside felt distant and unreachable. He shoved his hands into his pockets, head lowered. McCain gave his shoulder a gentle squeeze. "Come on in, it's warm," he urged softly. David took a tentative step inside. As they sat, a server greeted McCain warmly, but David felt as if everyone was staring. His shabby jacket, unkempt beard, and hollow cheeks drew glances of curiosity and pity, each one stinging despite the familiarity. McCain picked up a menu. "What would you like to eat?" David shook his head. "I'm not hungry," McCain insisted. "You need something warm." A steaming bowl of soup and a cup of coffee were placed before him. David ignored the soup but clutched the coffee cup, savoring its warmth against his cold hands. McCain simply waited, patient and silent. After a long pause, David finally spoke, his voice raw. "When I got back, there was no one waiting. No job, no family, just the same nightmares, over and over." McCain nodded. "Coming home doesn't mean the war's over. It just changes battlefields." David gave a hollow laugh. "I had a wife once, Linda. She always said I was strong, but when I came back, I wasn't strong anymore. The nightmares, they terrified her. One night, I screamed so loud, she left the next morning without a word. His voice cracked. I lost my job after that. My boss said I needed help, but who could afford it? No insurance, no family. I called my mom. She couldn't help. She told me, maybe when you're back on your feet, and then she hung up. His hands trembled as he gripped the coffee cup tighter. I just disappeared. Woke up one day, and I wasn't David Carter anymore, just another face on the street. McCain's throat tightened. This man, who had once served his country, was now lost and forgotten. The roughness in David's hands spoke of a soldier's past, but now they were empty, trembling from years of neglect. McCain leaned in, his voice firm. I can't let you stay here. I'm going to help you. David looked up, disbelief and uncertainty in his eyes. Why? You don't even know me. McCain offered a reassuring smile. You don't need to know everything about a man to see his worth. Sometimes you just have to look him in the eyes. David didn't hide his tears. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just a homeless man. He was still a soldier. He just needed someone to help him stand again. And McCain was ready to do that. McCain took David to a rehabilitation center. The first few days were the hardest. David struggled with his anger, his resentment, and the ghosts of his past. He felt like a prisoner in his own mind, trapped between guilt and despair. But McCain didn't give up on him. He visited David often, sitting by his side and sharing stories. Not just of victory, but of loss, of pain, of the battles fought long after the war had ended. He spoke of the soldiers he had seen fall, the friends he had lost, and the wounds that never truly healed. For the first time in years, David felt like someone understood. Slowly, he began to heal. With therapy, he started confronting his demons. He found a way to cope with his trauma. He battled through withdrawal, regained control of his thoughts, and eventually landed a job. Bit by bit, he felt like a part of society again. But the greatest victory wasn't just finding a job or a place to live. It was learning to see himself as a human being again. With McCain's support, David achieved something he had once thought impossible. He stood on his own 2 feet again. Years passed. David was no longer a man lost in the streets. He had become something else, someone who could now offer a hand to those who had once been like him. Through McCain's veteran support program, David found purpose. He wasn't just surviving anymore, he was helping others do the same. One evening, as he worked at a shelter for homeless veterans, a man walked in, his military jacket worn and tattered, his face lined with exhaustion. His shoulders sagged, his eyes heavy with defeat. David looked at him for a long moment. He knew that look. It was the same look he had worn once, in another lifetime. He walked over and sat beside the man, offering a warm smile. "Hey, brother," he said. "My name's David. I used to be just like you, but you're not alone anymore." Across the room, John McCain watched the scene unfold. He didn't need to say anything, because at that moment, he knew true heroes don't die on the battlefield. Sometimes they just need someone to bring them back to life.